Do you accept the terms of the contract? Yes. Place your finger on the tablet. Right here. Victor did as he was told. He had done what others told him his entire life. That's how he ended up in this situation. That's why he agreed to work on an asteroid far from home. Congratulations, you've been accepted as an operator for the intergalactic router. You start your duties tomorrow. Please place your finger on the tablet once more. Victor touched the glowing screen with the text. It lit up green. Okay, they'll install live monitoring on you and then send you to your destination. What? What? Monitoring? Safety requirements. Your vital signs will be recorded in the system. Fine. Victor's voice seemed to lose life. The company didn't even give him a hint of choice. Good luck in your new job. The recruiter stretched her lips into a fake smile, causing Victor to shudder, and disappeared from the screen. All he could do now was hope that the people on the asteroid would be friendlier. The asteroid, a piece of scabby gray stone, greeted him with low gravity and the absence of atmosphere. Plastic boxes and tunnels on the surface connected into one large base, the living place for router operators. After passing through the main airlock, the newly appointed operator found himself in the main building. Hello. No response came from the long, empty corridor. Hello, Victor repeated a little louder, feeling out of place in the new space. One of the wall displays suddenly lit up with a green light. A melodic artificial voice was heard nearby. Hello, welcome to the intergalactic router. My name is Kevin. How can I help? Hi, Kevin. I was assigned here as the new operator. Where is everyone? You must be Victor. Very nice to meet you. Please proceed to the conference room. I will conduct an induction. Blue directional lights in the form of arrows lit up on the walls of the corridor, leading deeper into the complex. The conference room, a large space for 50 people, consisted of a screen and many empty chairs. Victor chose the second row and awkwardly sat on the edge. The absence of other people frightened him and raised questions. He began to curse himself for not carefully studying the contract and not asking more. Where were the others, and what was he supposed to do? A presentation with the title Induction for New Employees appeared on the large screen in front of him. The slide skipped to the next one, and then further. At the end was a video about the company. Despite its grandiose name, the presentation turned out to be almost entirely useless. The only important information was about his duties. He was to connect to the router once a day for preventive diagnostics. If he failed to do so, the router would shut down and the company would impose a fine. At that moment, a checklist for diagnostics and job description automatically loaded onto Victor's phone. When the presentation ended, the conference room was again plunged into deafening silence. Kevin, where is everyone else? Clarify your question. Who else? The other employees who work with me. I can't be the only one doing everything here. Victor, you are not alone. I was created to help you. Where are the other people? Victor's voice cracked, betraying the panic that had been building inside him all this time. You are the only employee registered by the company. A new employee will appear if you stop performing your duties. What do you mean, stop? I have a contract. I can't just stop working. So I'm alone here. Contract execution can be interrupted for reasons beyond the operator's control. In that case, a new one will be sent, as the presence of a living operator is necessary for the router to work. A living operator? What's going on? I don't have access to more detailed information. You can use the network to find out more from the personnel department. Understood. Thank you, Kevin. Always at your service. Victor didn't know what to do. Everything felt unreal, as if everything that was happening was a cruel joke or an unfunny prank. At some point, he even thought that the melodic voice was mocking him. Although he knew that AIs were not capable of such things, the complex was designed for several dozen people, and it took Victor time to get used to the gaping emptiness instead of the supposed colleagues. He periodically felt lonely, although he could always contact old friends. But being so far away and not having the opportunity to leave the asteroid, he felt like he was trapped in stone, like an insect in pre-digital museums. However, it wasn't far from the truth. Several times he put on a spacesuit and went for a walk on the asteroid. At first, the low gravity and brightness of the stars seemed like an amazing gift to him, an incredible opportunity to experience something new. But over time, they only intensified his feeling of loneliness. Victor realized that there was nothing on the asteroid. It was just an ordinary, empty, lifeless boulder, similar to those stones that lay on the side of Earth roads. The only interesting part of the asteroid, the quantum core responsible for the router's operation, was impossible to see from the surface. It was hidden deep inside. After the first week, Victor almost stopped going on such walks. After several weeks, connecting to the router via the virtual network became routine. It was easier to get used to the work than to forced loneliness. The operator's chair was in a separate isolated room where there was nothing extra. It stood in the center, reclined back, as if for sleeping. Cast gloves were permanently attached to the armrests, inside which was a button to activate the virtual network. After activation, the gloves gripped the hands with an iron grip, and the operator's head was squeezed by the virtual network helmet. At first, completely fixed in an uncomfortable position, Victor felt like he was on an electric chair, but over time, he got used to such work, and the unpleasant sensations no longer interfered with him plunging into the virtual network. True, after each session, he walked around the base for at least half an hour, stretching numb body parts. Unpleasant, but bearable. Every day he sat in the chair and plunged into the virtual network to check the router's operation and touch the necessary report generation button. As explained in the documentation, it was called the dead switch. Human intervention was required so that the router wouldn't shut down. The absurdity and simplicity of the work additionally pressured Victor, making him rethink and return to those decisions that led him to this place. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't think of another way. Sooner or later, he would pay off all his debts and be able to return to Earth. All he could do now was wait and do what he was told. One day, the monotonous routine was interrupted by a changed task checklist. Victor looked at his phone in surprise. A mysterious firmware update for the router to a new version had been added to the list. He hadn't seen anything like that in the instructions, so he immediately asked Kevin. "Kevin, they sent me some new task. Do you know what this is?" "Yes, of course. Updating the router's firmware is a standard procedure, part of the operator's duties. Why haven't I heard about it before? And how often does this need to be done?" "According to my change log, it has never been done before on this asteroid." "You just said it's a standard procedure." "Yes, that's right. It's stated in your contract." "A useless set of microchips," Victor cursed. "I've noted this statement in your work profile." Loading the update didn't take much time. The network on the router was incredibly fast. The update came with installation instructions and a list of changes. Victor opened the instructions, several simple steps that anyone who had worked with the router for at least a few days could perform. Next, he opened the list of changes, a text file listing significant and minor improvements, as well as bug fixes. Victor skimmed through the text. Minor improvements and fixes didn't look like anything interesting, but his attention was drawn to a change from the list of significant ones. Increased router operating distance. Added ability to connect to unregistered devices. Victor read these lines several times, but still didn't fully understand what they meant. The authors of the update clearly didn't want to share detailed information. He was particularly puzzled by the point about increasing the router's operating distance, since, according to the company's statements, routers could already calmly provide a network within an entire galaxy. Victor even wanted to ask Kevin again, but, remembering previous conversations, he abandoned the idea. The AI, judging by everything, wasn't going to help, and the task in the checklist was still a task, so Victor got down to updating the router's firmware. The next day, Victor woke up in a good mood. His bed stood in the corner of the sleeping compartment, designed for 20 people. Several rows of identical beds divided the room into 4 parts. Next to each bed stood a nightstand intended for personal belongings. Instead of windows, there were built-in screens showing what was happening on the asteroid. The good mood didn't disappear, even when looking at the empty nightstands and the gray view of the asteroid. The completed update seemed to expand Victor's horizon of possibilities. He imagined that now he would constantly be doing unusual new tasks that no one had done before. He went to the dining room and had a hearty breakfast of gray protein porridge, just like every day before. He checked the checklist for today, no changes, and went to the operator's room. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, he felt that something had changed in the room, but he couldn't understand what exactly. There was almost nothing to change in the room, but still Victor couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness. Something was wrong. Literally a minute ago, he was going to his usual workplace and arrived. Where? He couldn't even come up with a suitable word for it. His instincts ordered him to run away from here, but he couldn't allow himself that. The instructions didn't assume relying on feelings. Kevin, has anything changed in the operator's room? No, no changes have been made. Thank you, Kevin. Victor slowly approached the chair, examined it, and then carefully looked around. Everything was as before. After thinking for a few seconds, he sat in the chair, inserted his hands into the cast gloves, and pressed the activation button. The helmet squeezed his head like a vice. The gloves squeezed his hands, wrists, and forearms. Everything was going as usual, and Victor plunged into the virtual network. The router's service functions hung in the air, flickering with colorful icons with symbols that made no sense. Victor had to rely on memory and periodically check against the documentation. The traffic passing through the router was visualized by a set of symbols of different colors forming a line. Each of the symbols ran forward, encrypted with complex algorithms that did not allow access to the traffic. The instructions prohibited touching these data ribbons, as well as any other interactions other than observation. Running lines in 100 unfamiliar languages flashed past him. There were many such lines here. Each was highlighted in its own color and related to a specific area of the galaxy. The report generation button hung in the air right in front of Victor. He was about to press it when he suddenly noticed something new out of the corner of his eye that he hadn't seen during all the short time he had been working. Several new lines were winding behind the report icon. Victor pushed the icon away from his face, floated closer to the unknown symbols, and looked carefully. The colors of the lines sharply differed from the usual ones: black-yellow, purple-blue, and poisonous red. The inner feeling of inexplicable anxiety intensified. The monitoring data reported that the traffic was coming from another galaxy altogether. What the hell? Victor thought. This couldn't be. There was no mention of anything like this anywhere. Not in the briefing, not in the documentation, not even in the company's commercials. Although they did like to fib about new features. I'll handle it. I can do it. I installed the update, and I'll figure this out too. I need this job. Driven by the desire to figure out the incomprehensible situation, he floated even closer and called up an additional traffic check. After a few seconds, as if sensing his presence, the black-yellow line bent, coiled into a loop, a spring, a noose. Victor watched its strange dance spellbound, unable to look away. A barely perceptible movement at the edge of his vision. The other two lines shifted in different directions, as if surrounding him. Now each of the symbol lines moved, bent, and looped. He watched with all his eyes, fascinated by the beauty of the dance, its mathematical precision, and at the same time absolute chaos. The black-yellow line suddenly disappeared from sight. Victor turned his head to find it. Suddenly, from behind, the poisonous red line pounced on him and wrapped around his neck in a loop. He grabbed it, gasping, trying to hold the loop. It turns out you can feel pain in the virtual network. A reckless thought flashed through his head, and then he jerked, trying to free himself from the deadly grip. His body panicked and fought for its life. Reacting before his mind, he felt some kind of tingling, as if an electric discharge had passed through him. His body jerked in a spasm. His eyes were closing, but he didn't give up. Suddenly, the black-yellow line appeared in front of him, hovered for a moment, and then abruptly plunged into his left eye. Victor screamed. He didn't know if he was screaming in the virtual network or in reality. Pain filled his entire brain. Nothing remained except pulsating, piercing pain. He began to convulse. His vision partially disappeared, but with his surviving eye, he saw the purple-blue line approaching him. The picture before his eyes turned black, came back. A moment later, the purple-blue line plunged into his second eye, and Victor completely lost consciousness, torn apart by incredible pain, repeating visual images, and long lines of unknown symbols. His body went limp, no longer able to resist. Victor opened his eyes. He was lying on his bed, still surrounded by nightstands and empty beds. Everything hurt. So much that as soon as he made one careless movement, he immediately groaned. Good morning. Reminder, under the contract, you must start work no later than 9 o'clock. Currently, you are 15 minutes late. I will have to note this in your profile. Kevin, what happened? You overslept the required start time. No, I mean in the chair. There, in the operator's room. Clarify the question. How did I end up in bed, you piece of metal? A flash of pain dampened Victor's anger. He had no strength left and couldn't think. His head was splitting, as if a billion simultaneous thoughts were trying to break out of there, which he didn't have time to think. You finished work yesterday. Then you went to the sleeping compartment and lay down in bed. Then you overslept the required start time. I remind you that after 2 warnings, a fine will be issued to you. Victor was silent. He lay for a couple more minutes, then with difficulty got up and climbed out of bed. On the screen, the gray asteroid mockingly stared with its craters. You don't understand what I saw there. It doesn't matter. You signed the contract and are obligated to fulfill it. Continue working. The recruiter refused to believe that the router tried to kill him, although Victor spent half an hour trying to explain to her what had happened. No arguments helped. Even a detailed description of the attack by the lines didn't cause any reaction. I want to terminate the contract. Then you'll pay a penalty. I don't care anymore. Do you have the necessary amount? I want to quit. Can't you hear me? Am I talking to a person? Fire me. I want to get as far away from here as possible and never come back. All right, Victor. I understand you. We'll start looking for a new operator, and when he's ready to leave, we'll fire you. I want to quit right now. Go to hell with your work. Take me away from here and send me home. I'm very sorry, Victor, but you'll have to work for another 3 months. That's what the contract says. Go to hell. Victor disconnected from the call. Something needed to be done. He couldn't continue working calmly, as if nothing had happened. The premonition of disaster was getting stronger, and he couldn't ignore it. The world around him was full of information, which was distracting, not allowing him to think clearly. Victor tried to focus only on the problem. The solution, crystal clear, like the starry sky over the asteroid, came to his mind unexpectedly. If he couldn't leave this place, then he needed to make the router itself disappear. He couldn't reach the quantum core, but maybe it was enough to destroy the operator's chair. Then the company would have no choice but to take him away from here. Without giving himself time to change his mind, Victor went to the warehouse with tools for small jobs. 10 minutes later, he was walking towards the operator's room, armed with a hammer of impressive size, the largest of those stored in the warehouse. Next to him in the corridor, a screen lit up and a melodic voice was heard. Victor, why do you need the tool? I don't register any malfunctions. Victor didn't answer. He had already convinced himself of the futility of chattering with this piece of metal. The voice changed, becoming mechanically harsh. Operator, answer the question. Victor stopped at the entrance to the compartment and pressed the panel next to the door. For a second, nothing happened, and then the door opened. Right in the center of the room, the chair was waiting. Only now everything had changed, and Victor no longer felt like a victim. For the first time in his entire life, he knew what to do. Your vital signs have changed. I register destructive intentions. Reminder, any damage to company equipment is punishable by a fine. Victor approached the chair, swung the hammer, and brought it down on the helmet with force. It was dented from The blow. The room was filled with an unpleasant, repetitive wail of a fire alarm. Then came the lifeless voice of Kevin. A fire has occurred in the operator's compartment. Initiating fire elimination protocol. Isolating the premises. The door to the compartment closed behind Victor. Starting air evacuation to eliminate the fire threat. Damn, is he serious? Victor thought, delivering another blow with the hammer. The answer wasn't long in coming. He heard a new sound. Air was leaving the premises through the ventilation. The company cared very much about preserving the equipment in any situation. Victor realized there wasn't much time left and swung the hammer again, and then again and again. After each blow, there were scratches, dents, and chips on the chair, but it didn't look like it could cause any serious damage. The air was running out. The supply was enough for 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Victor froze for a second. He realized that the entire environment was accessible to him in the form of numbers, not only the amount of air, but even the strength of the chair. He could calculate everything that was happening around him. All things were connected to each other. In this moment of revelation, he understood that he couldn't survive. He wouldn't have time to get out of here. The air was leaving too quickly. He had gone so far. There must still be hope. It can't all be in vain. And Victor screamed. And in this scream, he put all his strength, and the scream turned into a blow. Something in the operator's chair broke. Victor saw this sound. The recoil from the powerful blow returned to his wrist, and from there to his forearm. But now the situation had changed in his favor. I suggest you stop. If you don't, you will die as a result of an accident. Victor hated Kevin, hated what the AI embodied, but he couldn't do anything to him. But he could destroy the company's most valuable asset. This should save his life. Kevin would stop evacuating the air if the equipment was completely broken. He would no longer have a reason to kill. Well, or that's what Victor hoped. There was 29 seconds of air left. Victor saw that he was almost there. The last blow allowed him to get to the complex electronics. And he pounced on it, tearing out microchips and boards from this incredibly complex device. A sound similar to a thin squeak came from inside. The emergency alert system turned on. It worked. I did it, Victor rejoiced. Power cables broke free from the wreckage of the broken chair. They beat against the metal floor like a fish thrown onto the shore. Each cable emitted a vibrating low sound. Chaotic movements had the splendor of fractals and at the same time resembled non-Euclidean geometry. They bent at impossible angles, as if not used to the rules of the current reality. They were beautiful and deadly dangerous. And it was Victor who freed them. He lay on the floor, gasping. There was almost no air left. At that moment, the cables seemed to sense him again, just like there, in the virtual network. Only now they had a physical embodiment, and he couldn't do anything. The voice of Kevin was heard in the room. Complete oxygen shut down in 3, 2, 1. Done. Like dogs breaking free from a leash at a command, the power cables rushed to Victor and squeezed him in their steel embraces, squeezing the last drops of life out of him. Victor froze in horror. His weakened body was unable to resist. One of the cables rose and hovered next to him. Then another. Somewhere in his subconscious, Victor could distinguish them, although he didn't know how. He knew they were different. Victor could only look at them. There was nothing else he could do. And then both cables plunged into his eyes. With a cry of pain, the last air he carefully stored in an unconscious attempt to survive escaped from him. His entire body went into convulsions, just like then in the virtual network. Only now he felt every cell, felt electricity running through him. And a dense stream of information, tangible, real, overwhelming. That moment, everything fell into place. The body had knowledge. He was dying, but he felt the connection of everything with everything. He saw the vast intergalactic network. He saw the flow of data rushing between many different galaxies. A dense information network, in front of which the entire network of the company's routers was just a pitiful grain of sand. Information having the density of objects. Objects disintegrating into information. Victor understood what would happen next. He could predict the future of the company and the future of people. Before dying, he smiled one last time. And then his body evaporated and became pure information.